You're watching Spark TV, and joining me now is Nick Forbes, Newcastle City Council Leader. So, hi Nick.
Hello, great
How
to
are
see
you?
you. I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for joining us in our studio and here at Spark. So, thank you very much for your time. And obviously, sort of still newly appointed as leader of the council, would you say?
Yes, well, I've got another couple of weeks to go before it's my first 100 days.
Right.
So I've formally took over as leader of the council on the 25th of May this year. And it's been a bit of a whirlwind summer, trying to get to know the job, dealing with some of the big issues that I've had to start addressing in Newcastle.
Yeah.
But I can honestly say I've loved every minute of it. It's been challenging, it's been tough, but I've got a great team of people around me, so it's a very exciting time for me.
So, what's it like, sort of taking over after it was a Liberal Democrat controlled council for like 30 years?
Well, it's the nature of politics that you get political change, but because I hadn't been political change in Newcastle for quite a while, there was quite a well-established way of doing things, and me and my team taking control has really shaken things up. So we've introduced much more focused priorities for the council. We've introduced new cabinet arrangements, and we've got a new team of people, so there's new politicians for officers to get to know. So it's been quite a big change process to oversee, and I'm really impressed by the way that the officer team within the council have risen to the challenge of that change process. And inevitably it takes a little time for relationships to start to develop, but I think what we've got is a really strong team that's going to start to deliver really well for Newcastle and of course the wider region, because what happens in Newcastle has wider resonance here in the rest of the North East.
Absolutely. A lot of people have said that obviously with it being a Liberal Democrat controlled council for such a long time, that it was sort of more to do with the Lib Dems on a national level sort of being a part of the coalition government, and then we had the whole sort of row developing about tuition fees, raising the cap to £9,000. What do you say to people who say it's unfair that for what the Liberal Democrats have done on sort of a national level has sort of totally put them in ruins at a local level as well?
I would say that there aren't two Liberal Democrat parties. There isn't a national Lib Dem party and a local Lib Dem party. They're all the same party. In the same way that the Labour Party is one party, be it in Westminster or in Newcastle or wherever it's in power in local government. And most people, I think, have an understanding about what the difference between the local council and what the government is and does. And it's certainly true to say that the Lib Dems made themselves very, very unpopular with their coalition deal with the Conservatives, and also many of the decisions that they took around things like tuition fees, where they voted diametrically opposite to what they'd promised previous to the election. But we worked very hard in Newcastle for the local elections. It wasn't just a case of we won it by default. We've worked very hard to put forward a positive vision for what Newcastle could be in the future. We went out and persuaded people of that vision. I'm very excited that we had hundreds of volunteers came out and helped us to put that vision into reality. And we knocked on thousands and thousands of doors across the city. And that is what brought us the election victory. Yes, the Lib Dems were unpopular, but they didn't lose all of their seats in Newcastle. They still had a vote. What went up was the Labour vote, and that's what pushed us over the boundary into power.
So it was more like more people voting for Labour than the votes going down for the Liberal Democrats.
The Labour got 52% of the vote in Newcastle in this year's local elections, as opposed to 37% last year. So there's been a big rise in the Labour vote.
Right, and obviously at this time of the year, you've got a lot of students getting A-level results, GCSE results, but a lot of them are really sort of worried about the prospect of having to pay more for university in the future, and of course the job market and finding sort of a stable work environment. What kind of things are the Newcastle Council sort of pushing forward to sort of try and maybe reassure young people a bit more?
And you're right. I mean, this is one of the really big issues that faces us, certainly here in the North East. In Newcastle, I know we have just over 9,000 people unemployed. A quarter of those are under 25. So youth unemployment is a huge issue for us here. And what I see, in addition to the lack of job opportunities for young people, is the coalition government choking off opportunities for young people around, so we've seen not just increases in tuition fees, but we've seen abolition of EMA, which supported a lot of people from poorer backgrounds to get on and study. And the situation for local authorities is very difficult. We're facing cuts of £100 million.
Yeah.
Despite that, we've created 20 new apprenticeship posts in Newcastle from this September. We're working very closely with the schools to introduce our own version of EMA instead, to replace the one that the government took away. And I'm working with businesses to promote job opportunities for young people, so that young people feel that they have a hope of a job. And it might not be the ideal job, but if we can get people into a job, then that's the basis for getting experience and being able to then move on further down the line.
Just getting on the ladder.
Absolutely getting on the ladder. Because I think for people to feel that they have no hope and no opportunity is the worst thing that can happen to them. And I'm determined, despite the difficulties that we're facing from the government cuts, despite the difficulty of the national situation, we will do what we can locally to help people get into work. And that means supporting our young people.
Yeah, but because obviously sort of the economic situation is sort of no two ways around it. We're sort of in this difficult economic period, do you think?
Absolutely. And we have high rates of unemployment. We have real difficulty with a lot of our trading partners, particularly in the European Union, because growth in the Eurozone is running at less than 0.2%. We also see America's economy starting to go into decline. What we've got to do is find new growth markets in places like India and China, because actually that, and developing our relationships with the Middle East, will be the opportunity to bring more investment into the northeast and to kind of create the kind of jobs that we want to see. Despite these difficulties, though, I think it's really important that we send a message of confidence in the northeast, because what investors want to know is that we are resilient, we can deal with difficult times, and we have a vision for how we'll get forward to the future.
Yeah.
And that's the important message that I'm giving out to businesses, both existing businesses and businesses who might want to relocate here, that yes, we are going through difficult times, but we can cope, and we're open for business.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Newcastle certainly does show that, because it is sort of a greatly visual city in places, Newcastle.
Yeah.
I mean, I was down by the quayside the other day, and it's just an incredible city. Haven't really spent much time in Newcastle that much, but when you do get down there, you do sort of realise how visually capturing the city kind of is in a way.
Well, I mean, Newcastle's a really exciting city. We've got the quayside area, and we have those fantastic, iconic views of the bridges on the Tyne linking Newcastle and Gateshead. We have some world-class cultural facilities. In a couple of weeks' time, the Theatre Royal on Grey Street will be reopening after a big refurbishment. But we've also got places like Live Theatre, which established the Lee Hall play, the Pitman Painters, which went on to play on in Broadway, for example. We've got Northern Stage, we have the Stage Gateshead on the south bank of the river. We have the shops in Newcastle, and of course a lot of people come into Newcastle because of the retail that there is there, you know, the shopping facilities. We have two amazing universities. We have Newcastle College, we have Newcastle Hospitals, we have two, you know, the RVI and the Freeman Hospital, with in some cases some world-class services. I mean, some of the stuff I've seen in the last few weeks, you know, creating artificial hearts for babies is some amazing technology. So we have an awful lot to offer here in the northeast, and it's important that we talk that up, because often people looking at the northeast from outside who've never been here think, oh well, you know, it's all flat caps, whippets and keeping cool in the bath. Well, anybody who comes here will see that it's absolutely not like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for example as well, sort of Sunderland University and all the sort of, because we are seeing this sort of one of the universities which sort of has a massive media sort of influence and massive.
Well, and actually the media industries and the creative industries, I think, are one of the growth areas for the future. We've already got a hub of activity going on here. We have some national and international film and TV companies based here in the northeast, in Newcastle and the wider area. And that, I think, is one of the growth markets for the future. We can offer amazing locations for people to come and film here. Yeah. We can offer skills and infrastructure to help people. And I was talking to somebody a few months ago who was setting up a radio station in Brazil based in an office in Gateshead, because they've got the broadband connections to be able to do that. And just imagine if the North East could be at the hub of a new kind of world infrastructure around creative media industries. That would be really exciting.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah.
Especially during difficult times, it's sort of the boost we
Yeah,
kind of
well,
need in the region.
particularly exciting for media students looking for a job here.
Absolutely, that would be good.
Yeah.
It's the main point, I think. And I just want to move on to talk about another element, and that is obviously when you were appointed leader of Newcastle City Council, you became sort of the first openly gay council leader that there's been in the North East, which obviously for the LGBT community is just incredibly important because it gives more of a sense of visibility for our community. And I know that you were in Out magazine as sort of the icon feature, because each month that magazine does the feature on a gay icon in our society, and you also were in the Pride Power List, I noticed, which saw other key figures such as we had Alan Carr, who you actually came before, I believe, on the list.
Yes,
which is quite impressive to see, because obviously Alan Carr was sort of featured as an icon in the Out magazine the month before the issue that you were in, which I believe is the August issue that you're in. So I'm just sort of wondering, what do you think needs to be done in the North East to sort of, and obviously the wider country and the wider world even, to really help LGBT people more and feel like they're sort of more recognised in the media and in our society?
I think that's a really interesting question, and if I just think about my own personal journey, I grew up in a small village in County Durham, and just got to think about the enormous social change in terms of acceptability about being LGBT that I've experienced in my own lifetime. I can honestly say that I've never experienced prejudice within my own party or within my own council around this. I have had difficulties in Newcastle and have occasionally been subject to homophobic behaviour from some people, and I'm a relatively strong and confident person, but it knocks you.
Yeah.
It really does. So I understand how damaging it can be for people. I understand how difficult it can be for people to come out because they fear the reaction of families and friends.
Yeah.
I know that my experience was, on the whole, very positive. And if I can be a role model for people and to say, I'm gay, but I'm also doing a very important political job. I'm in a public position with a lot of responsibility, and I happen to be gay. That, I think, is a way of starting to make people see that we're just part of the mainstream. Because gay people, and LGBT people, I should say, not just gay men, LGBT people are everywhere in our society. You know, we're politicians and hairdressers and police officers and nurses and street workers and library staff, and you know, we do all of the different jobs that there are. We're not separate in some way. We're part of our society. And if you take Pride, for example, Pride is the one day in the year where we are visible, very visible, to our cities and our communities. And yes, that's the day we come together to celebrate who we are and show the strength of our numbers. But we shouldn't forget that there are 364 other days in the year where we get on and do ordinary jobs.
Yeah, but I certainly think sort of Pride's sort of an empowering time of the year, especially sort of when you've got July, August is when lots of the Prides in the UK begin. And obviously there's been other Prides cropping up everywhere. Sunderland's gearing up for its first Pride next year. And then you've got, I think there was Cumbria Pride even.
Yes.
So there's just loads of different Prides cropping up everywhere, which is really important to see. How important do you think it is to maybe somebody who's fearful of being openly gay and who maybe haven't taken that step, especially sort of young people?
I wish we'd had Pride when I was growing up, because I felt very much alone. And so I have an understanding about how isolated people can feel growing up LGBT. And the idea that not only is there a wider community out there, but that it's an accepted community and that people understand the value that we add to our society is actually very important. And so, I would say to young people in particular who are worried about coming out, don't be afraid of the shadows. Don't be afraid to come out into the light. Don't be afraid to be who you are, because actually, if you go through your life pretending to be something that you're not, then you're not living a fulfilling life. And for me, it was about coming out and then just getting on with it. And being gay informs me, but it's not the whole part of my life. It's not the whole part of my purpose in what I'm trying to achieve in politics. I've got big things I want to do around tackling inequalities, around getting people into work, around providing decent neighbourhoods. And the fact that I can do that as a gay man shows that we can do anything.
So like you were saying before, not separating us, just sort of saying, well, we're part of
Absolutely.
the society, but we want to be visible as well.
Absolutely, and it goes both ways. It's about people recognising the part that we play in society and not seeing us as in some way to be mocked or discriminated against. And I do think homophobia is probably one of the last areas where it is in some places acceptable to discriminate against people on grounds, even though we have legal protection now. Only in the last few years we've had legal protection, but it's still probably the last area where people feel it's acceptable to make kind of throwaway remarks and comments about being gay or whatever.
So sort of like we see in maybe advertisement, for example, there's no
Precisely.
real visual presence, and when there is a visual presence, it's sort of perceived as over the top and massively stereotypical rather than just representative.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I mean, it's not to say that there's like a lot of gay people with a campness. It's not to say that there isn't that there, but there's more to a person than trying to brand everybody with the same brush and stereotype them in the same way.
Absolutely.
So do we need more sort of visible LGBT people in advertisements, for example, do you think?
I find it really astonishing that LGBT people are often the people with the highest levels of disposable income, because often they don't have children, and yet advertising, nobody's really worked out how to promote advertising to us. I find it really odd that in the run up to Christmas, for example, I mean, Christmas is still a long way away, thank goodness, but in the run up to Christmas we'll see all of these adverts about happy families and children playing with perfect parents and so on, and actually that can be very isolating for somebody watching that, because you don't ever see anything of yourself in those adverts. You don't see anything of yourself in a lot of the mainstream media, and yet shows like Coronation Street, for example, which have a number of gay and lesbian and transgender characters actually, are often mocked by the right-wing press in this country for being too politically correct. And so, even when people do try to do something about it, there is a backlash from some quarters.
I saw that TV programme, The Casualty, and there was a gay kiss during that programme, and apparently the BBC started to receive many complaints about that, which in the 21st century is just...
It's like, some people are gay, get over it, Yeah,
like that campaign.
Precisely.
And I think that, like, talking about campaigns, I think that's a good direction to go in. We've got to see It Gets Better, which is an incredible project on YouTube.
Yes.
And talking about advertisements as well, I thought it was absolutely fantastic to see the Google Chrome advert, which incorporated the It Gets Better project in. They sort of used that project involving LGBT people to sort of advertise their browser software, which was really impressive to see, and certainly like Pride sort of an element of empowerment in a way.
Absolutely.
I thought it was just really brilliant to have that in there, showing a bit more sort of visualness again, like we've been talking about.
There was some interesting research done a couple of years ago that talked about what makes cities successful, and the research identified that one of the things that makes cities successful is having a strong pink triangle or gay village or whatever you want to call it, but some kind of sense of there is a gay community within this area. And it's really interesting because Newcastle city centre is in some ways a collection of little villages. We have the gay village around the Centre for Life. We have the Chinese quarter, and we have the retail quarter. We have the Discovery quarter. We have the Heritage quarter, and we have other bits of residential developments in the city centre. And I think it's one of the interesting things about Newcastle. It's what brought me to Newcastle in the first place, coming from the northeast. The idea that there was a kind of gay scene there to socialise with. And I think there's some learning there for other cities around what helps make cities successful, because it's not just about having space for gay people to go. It's everything that it symbolises around being inclusive, about being tolerant, about being forward-looking, and about being creative and diverse.
And obviously, like you say there about the future, obviously I think looking to the future is important. Do you think, especially during these economic times, we have to look at the future a bit more?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that I think we've learned over the last few years, from the collapse in our banking industry to the recession in the economy, has been the dangers of simply relying on financial trading and property values as drivers of economic growth. And what we've got to think about is how we can come up with an alternative form of economic growth, good growth if you like, which supports sustainable environmental, social objectives. What that means, in a nutshell, is where we want to see new jobs created, we want to see people benefit from those jobs. So it's about getting young people into work. It's about making sure that people from ethnic minority communities are not discriminated against. It's about making sure that LGBT people play their full role in our economic life and aren't simply sidelined into hairdressing and creative industries, which is often what people stereotype LGBT people as. So there's a big job to be done in terms of breaking down barriers and thinking of people in terms of the skills they can offer, as well as the diverse backgrounds that they come from.
Would you say, I'm not sure if you have sort of a plan in your head of what you want to achieve as leader of Newcastle City Council, but would you say the issues of equality is one of your major issues to sort of approach, maybe in your top 5?
Yeah, absolutely. If I think about when I was growing up, if I think about my experience about realising that I was gay, that was profoundly important to me, because it made me think about not just me, but how I relate to other people. And we simply cannot be a society where everybody just looks after themselves. We have to have relationships with other people in the broadest sense. We are human beings, we're social creatures. It's important that we have a sense of belonging. And breaking down those barriers that people put up, harnessing the energy and enthusiasm and drive that we have within different communities, getting people to work together rather than pull apart, is, I think, one of the things that will see Newcastle in the northeast through the difficult times that there are ahead. We've got to move forward as one city and as one region. One of the things that's really struck me in the few months that I've been leader of the council now is how we have different cities within the city. So we have people in some parts of the city who don't have any relationship to people in other parts of the city. We have different communities who don't speak to each other. We have people in different sectors who never connect. And I think if we can break down those barriers, break down those boundaries, work together for the common good to achieve a common goal, that makes us stronger. And it's my firm belief that together we're stronger. To do that, we've got to break down the barriers. To do that, we've got to eliminate discrimination. And one of the biggest lasting barriers that we have to overcome is homophobia. And I do think, in the grand scheme of all the things that I want to achieve, tackling homophobia in a whole range of different ways is absolutely part of my agenda.
Right. Well, Nick Forbes, Leader of Newcastle City Council, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.